Hello, everybody. Welcome to this evening's presentation. I'm so glad to see so many of you signed up for this, and hopefully a whole lot of you joining us tonight. As you're joining in, it's kind of fun if you'd like in the chat to say where you're from. And remember, please, in the chat, you can choose to everyone, or you can choose to host and panelist. And if you select everyone, then we all get to see if there's people near us joining in and just how far away across the country everybody else is joining in. It's really quite fun. So feel free to do that. Nova Scotia, great. Parkdale, Toronto. I'm Sarah Koolber. I'm with the Canadian Wildlife Federation's Gardening for Wildlife program. I've been with it for about 20 years now, and I'm just west of Ottawa in Lanark County. Here we go, New Brunswick, more Ontario, Manitoba, Ottawa, Alberta. Oh, great mix already. BC, yay. Ontario, Thunder Bay, London, Chelsea. Well, that's fun. Please keep everyone, please keep sharing, and I'll just go over a little bit of housekeeping. So if you have any questions for Gil this evening, please do put them in the Q&A. And if you are new to Zoom, again, just hover your mouse, you'll see the chat, you'll see the Q&A. Just put your questions, please, in the one spot in the Q&A. So at the end, I'll just go through as many questions as we can get through for Gil. And this presentation will be recorded, and we'll send a follow-up email via Zoom in about, I don't know, a couple of days from now. So you will get the replay link and any other helpful links that we can think of to support you in learning about and supporting flowerflies. What else have we got to say here? More people sharing where they're from. Norway, how cool is that? Pelican Beach, BC. Yeah, very, very, very neat. Okay, well, you guys keep mentioning that if you like, and I'm going to move along a little bit. What else would I to tell you? So I've said I'm Sarah Koolber with the Canadian Wildlife Federation, and we are a national charitable organization that's been around for over 60 years now. And we do a variety of things to help wildlife and wild spaces. We work with policymakers, we do research, but we also do educational initiatives such as this one, where we help people discover our incredible local and migratory wildlife and understand and appreciate how remarkable they are, and then give them the tools to support them in whatever way they can. And I'd like to acknowledge also that I'm on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, and that I respect the inherent and treaty rights of all Indigenous peoples across this land and all lands. And I like with this Gardening for Wildlife program and this webinar series how we are doing what the Indigenous people have been doing for eons. We're doing our best to respect nature, to take only what we need, to give back, to work in harmony with our wild neighbors. So that's very cool. Okay, so I am very happy that you're here for this wonderful webinar, The Prettiest Flies You'll Ever See in Your Garden, Flower Flies, with our super special guest, Gil Miranda. Gil is an entomologist originally from Brazil. After getting his PhD from the University of Guelph, Gil worked in the Brazilian Amazon as a researcher and conservation officer. And now calling Canada his home, at CWF, Gil is involved with pollinator monitoring in Ontario and insect identification from surveys in the Canadian prairies. And I'm very glad to call Gil a colleague, and I'm so glad to learn more about flower flies. I love them. I don't know if you guys know much about them, or if you've ever had one of these, like the one on the screen here, a tiny one, sort of hover in front of your face out of curiosity, as if it's wanting to know who you are and what you're about. I think they're really cool creatures, and I'm very excited to learn more from Gil. So Gil, thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to silence myself and hand it over to you.
Okay, Sarah, thank you very much for that warm welcome. I'm so surprised to the amount of people that came to join this presentation. Thank you very much all for attending here today. Hopefully for those who don't know flower flies, I hope you will get out of this presentation starting to love these little critters as much as I do. So, as Sarah presented, my name is Gil Felipe Gonçalves Miranda. I'm originally from Brazil, and I work with flower flies. That's where I specialized. I'm gonna give a little bit of background about myself, just so people can get to know a little bit what I did and what I worked for, and like why are you at CWF and why are you giving presentations on flower flies right now. So I started as a taxonomist back in Brazil. That's how I started developing the pleasure to work with serpents, the flower flies. Because I was very interested in doing recognizing the species, the different ones, because in Brazil, as a lot of people know, there's a huge diversity in the whole tropical regions, the neotropics, especially this South America. There's a high diversity of all sorts of different organisms, and flower flies are not different. So it always enticed me of I could see all these different species, but I couldn't name them because there was no revision done. There was no studies being done on top of them. So I took upon myself, I want to make this clearer. I want to get to understand and know these guys. So that's how I started working with taxonomy, which is basically recognizing, naming these species, and then creating the tools to help people distinguish between them. So they don't have to do all the thorough study that taxonomists usually do. And then we can come out with a nice, neat project so anyone can hopefully identify them. Just a little explanation what I'm doing there. That's not a regular bottle. I'm not just walking around in the woods drinking. That's actually a solution that we sometimes use to try to attract flower flies to the vegetation. It's a mixture of honey, water, and cola pop. And with that, we just spray it on the leaves. And sometimes if you go back and forth, that attracts not only flower flies, other organisms, but it's a good way of attracting flower flies to observe them and capture if that's what you're going for. So I originally come from Brazil, as I said, from the state of Paraná. So that's in the southern part of Brazil. It's a more temperate climate there. And I obtained my major in biology and did my master's in entomology there as well. It's a beautiful land there as well. It's well known for the Araucaria angustifolia moist forest. It's a conifer that's very unique to our region. As you can see on the landscape there, it's one of the dominant trees in that kind of forest. And also, it's also a part of the larger biome of the Atlantic forest, which is a more moist forest closer to the sea, to the coastal line of Brazil, in the southern Brazil. And it's a very moist forest, and has actually, evolutionary speaking, it's kind of related to the Amazonian forest. But nowadays it's a very big hotspot and has a lot of endemic organisms, or that means creatures that only occur there, creatures and plants that only occur there. And some of them are related to other organisms from the Amazon. After my studies there, I was invited to do my PhD, pursue it in taxonomy in Canada. And I worked and I studied at the University of Guelph in Ontario with all these wonderful people and colleagues that I can still call friends today, still working around Canada and the States as well. And during this period, I visited several collections, was part of my PhD study, and collected and worked with several materials. And one of the results from my studies was this key to the groups of flower flies from North America. I'll get back to this later on at the end of the presentation, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. Also, another part of my PhD, I was working with a neotropical group of flower flies that was considered just a single genus. It's kind of single group of organisms. But through my studies, I could see that we're actually several different kinds of groups of flower flies inside this group. So all these samples here on this picture are different genera that we call different groups of that previous group. There was only one. After I finished my PhD and I went back to Brazil, I got a postdoc position in the Brazilian Amazon. It was always a small dream of mine because Brazil is full of different biomes, and a lot of people, of course, know about the Amazon, and that was one of the locations that I would love to work on. And fortunately, I got an opportunity there as a postdoc. So here, just a little insight of the Brazilian Amazon. Oops, sorry. Just go back a little bit here. Come on. sorry, just give me a quick second. I had a little glitch. Voila, that's me. So during and after finishing my PhD and then starting my postdoc in the Brazilian Amazon, I continued working with neotropical, which is the organisms from the tropical parts of Central America and South America. And I also started working more with macro photography because all my experience during my PhD, I could see the beauty that it was getting live pictures of specimens. It was not only it is beautiful to see these organisms live, but there's also characters in these organisms that you can't see after they're dead. And so I started to go after more macro photography and try to enrich all my publications, all the work that I did with more live pictures. So continuing my work with taxonomy and working to try to name all these different groups and species inside flower flies, I work with more revisions where I try to look at a group as a whole and try to see like how many species are in there. And I try to do more identification keys like the one that I did for North America and started using that model for other organisms inside flower flies. Also, this incurred in a lot of visits to different international collections and other Brazilian collections. I ended up, as some of my results was a key to the groups of flower flies in the Brazilian Amazon and some other picture keys as well for other genera of neotropical flower flies. So it was a great pleasure working in the Amazon because I had the opportunity to work with beautiful landscapes going upstream on the Rio Negro and Rio Solimões, the Negro and Solimões rivers, sorry. And these two rivers are the ones that will join and form the Amazonas River. So these are some of the spots in the state of Amazonas inside the Brazilian Amazon that I was fortunate enough to go collecting and work on. And during my different projects, oh, don't glitch on me again, come on. I'm terribly sorry for this. Boom, there you go. So, and then taking trips through boats and sometimes in small airplanes, because some places you can only reach through that way. I also went into collecting expeditions with other colleagues. I hope you can see here, but in the right here, this is a canopy trap. So it's traps that we launch a rope over the tallest trees, then we tie a trap to the other end, and then we just pull it up there and leave the trap for a while. So it collects specific groups of flies that are only and other insects that are only occurring at the canopy of the trees. And and I also helped, I gave some classes to undergrads and graduate students, so teaching in techniques of collecting bugs and also working a little bit of taxonomy. At another project, as Sarah mentioned, I worked as a conservation officer after a period. I finished my postdoc and then I got an opportunity to work with actual more hands-on conservation in Brazilian Amazon, which was another calling of mine that I wanted to pursue. So in the state of Pará, still inside the Brazilian Amazon, I was working with conservation, very large conservation areas there that were, as we named them, full protection. So in these conservation areas, there was no, they were solely to preserve the Amazonian forest, and at most open for scientific research and controlled ecotourism. So very remote areas and very pristine still Amazonian forest, beautiful places. To get some places, there were some dirt roads that we could get to, very hard access. We got a lot of trucks stuck there when we worked there. There's an interesting, the local population there, there's a lot of their income comes from extraction of the Brazilian nut. So this picture is one of the Brazil nut tree. It's a huge, one of the tallest trees in the Amazonian forest. Also related to these places, there's still like some preserved areas there, and the local communities that still live there, and traditionally from this side, the institute that I was working on, we also had the responsibility of working together with them. And in this case, I was teaching them about the biodiversity monitoring program that we wanted to place in our conservation areas, and that would require also the help of these local populations, either with access to or actual citizen science for themselves to monitor the organisms in these conservation areas. Also, other jobs required me also to do surveillance for illegal activity in these places. That gets a little bit more sketchy because, unfortunately, as you might have heard, there's a lot of illegal gold mining going on in the Brazilian Amazon, and my conservation area was the conservation area that I worked on was being targeted by these illegal activities. So I also had to get into small plains land and in our partners, native Brazilians that also bordered these conservation areas where we worked, and and work together with them to try to find these spots. And then afterwards, my institute would work with the federal police or the military to try to suppress these illegal activities there. So, oh, guess it's going to be happening a lot in this presentation today. I'm so sorry, everyone. I'm having a glitchy program here on my side. And there we go. So another place, this is further in the northern parts of the Brazilian Amazon. It's very interesting because we have inside the Brazilian Amazon savanna-like formations. There are natural occurring actually there. So you will see these more bushes and small trees, more sparse, more open areas. And in this area, there's also other native Brazilians that have territories there that work together with the institute that I worked to try to stop these illegal activities. So I would also coordinate with them for actions that both our groups could work together to try to stop the illegal activities from crossing the borders of their territories. And the conservation areas that we worked on was beautiful work that we were able to do together. So that's a little bit of my background. And then nowadays, I was always a small dream of mine to come back to Canada and settle here because I enjoy this country, love this country so much. And it brought me back to Ottawa, which is where I'm currently based now, and working with Canadian Wildlife Federation in several different projects where they needed the help of an entomologist. So one of them, as Sarah mentioned, like there's some, we are doing some surveys on the prairies to check how grazing is affecting insect populations there. I'm helping in the capacity of training people and also identify organisms that are occurring there. And another one that we've been doing more close by to home here in Lanark and Leeds and Grenville counties, close to Ottawa, we're surveying for pollinators in different sites in this area, which are going through rights of way areas, which is roadside terrain, that we're trying to see the effects of different maintenance techniques in these roadsides. How are they affecting the pollinators? So we have places that are under like a low intensity maintenance practice. So very low mowing and no use of herbicide. Sometimes it's just like spot herbicide or spot removal of invasives. And then we have other places where they have like intensive mowing going on. And I've been in these sites collecting the pollinators, identify them to species, and then our group analyzes to see if we can detect any effect on it. So a little spoiler here. Yes, when there's too much spraying of herbicide, there's too much mowing, that affects the numbers of and species of flower flies and other pollinators there as well. So for the colleagues that live in Ottawa and around the region, if you see me around there, I'll probably be wearing a mask during spring because grass pollen really gets to me and makes me sneeze nonstop. So if I'm wearing a mask, it's not because I'm sick, I'm just trying to protect myself from pollen. So, okay, let's get down to why everyone is here. So who are the flower flies? Well, they're actually true flies. So they're actually flies because most insects usually have 4 wings or 2 pairs of wings, but flies are the only insects that have two wings, 1 pair. And the other one is the other supposed second pair is actually modified. So as you can see, hopefully you can see here, this is a flower fly, and they only have 2 wings. From this angle here, I just want to show you guys the modified second pair of wings, which we call hautier, plural hautiers. And so it's this structure here. And they function more to help the fly balance its flight. But but most of the proportion to actually keep the fly aloft is its wings. So I'm trying to keep this very simple, and I want to try to avoid too much technical language. But just so everyone knows, the name of this family, the scientific name for the family for flower flies, it's Syrphidae. I'll probably mention this later on the presentation, but just so you know, that's the scientific name of the family. So another wonderful thing and very interesting about flower flies is that they're young, the larvae, the immatures of syrphids, they have very diverse habitats where they occur, and more so than the adults that are usually feeding on flowers and having nectar and pollen. The larvae actually in different groups of flower flies go into different mediums. So we have aquatic filter feeders. The rat-tailed maggot is one of the common names for the larvae of this group. So they have they stay underwater and they filter usually where there's organic material in decomposition, and they filter this liquid to feed on the bacteria that are growing there. And they usually just keep on breathing. I hope you guys can see my doodle here, because where the air comes in, it's at the tip of this tube, and this tube just stays right above the surface water. There are some hairs that help keep a bubble of air on top so no water goes inside and drowns the larvae, and so that's how they can stay underwater. A lot of these that also occur in liquid, not necessarily in water, but they might occur in a more dense medium with decomposing matter, like for example, a rot hole of a tree or decaying wood. It's not completely liquid, but it's moist enough where these kinds of larvae can feed on. Another group of no spoilers. Another group of larvae inside flower flies are the predaceous kind. It's very common to see them preying on plant lice, for example, and they are very hungry little larvae. I think last paper that I read about it's like over 100 plant lice per larvae per stage of its life. So these are probably a pretty common, might be a pretty common sight in your gardens. If you look closely, you'll see that a lot of these that eat plant lice or other of these small pests and other insects that will feed on plants. When the larvae, the syrphid larvae goes there, it kind of like pierces its prey, and then just like lifts it up and then just sucks its content inside. Sorry, sometimes it sounds kind of maybe too dark, but it's very fascinating. See how they feed. And also another group that is very cool are the common name that been used in North America are ant flies. And that's not because they look like ants, but actually their larvae, which is this little flat thing here, they're very unique and very distinct. These organisms, these flower flies in particular, they put their eggs inside the ant nests, and the larvae develops in there, preying on eggs and larvae of the ants. And a lot of these species from this group, they actually have a kind of a chemical smell on top of them, on their cuticle, on their skin, that actually is similar to those of the ants. So the ants don't recognize them as a foreign entity and just like part of their colony. And then that's how these larvae usually feed and grow until they become a full-size adult. Oops, there's my doodle there. So mimicry, you don't need to answer now, but just to try your eyes out, I just want you guys to see if you can distinguish what is a bee or a wasp here and what's a flower fly, because this is a beautiful thing that occurs a lot inside the flower flies, is that they have shapes and colors that are very similar to bees and wasps. So and this is a trait that we see in organisms where it kind of like they don't sting, they don't bite, but the organisms, their models, the bees and wasps that they are mimicking do, right? So that kind of gives the flower flies a little bit of an advantage, because if a predator, a bird, for example, will think twice before they try to eat a syrphid, because it looks like a bee, looks like a wasp, so that might be a little bit dangerous. So they will probably think twice about it. There's another cool thing that happens also in some of the species of flower flies, is that even their wings are kind of colored differently, which kind of mimics not only the colors but the shapes in wasps, for example. So it gets to that level. There's some other flower flies, including that I will show you later, that their antennae are not very long. The wasps and bee usually have long antennas, and they keep like moving them around when they're walking on surfaces or on flowers. And flower flies usually they don't have antennas as long as that. But some of these species, they actually get their front legs, they put it to the front, and then they kind of mimic the movement of what the wasps and bees do. So it's another, not only on their appearance, but their habits, actually, their behavior kind of mimics. So it adds more to that, like, I'm a wasp, I'm a bee, don't mess with me. And just for you, all of you looking in your garden and you want to be sure that, like, oh, is this a bee? Is this a wasp? Or is it a flower fly? I want to get closer. So usually, like mimics, in this case, the flower flies, they usually occur in lower numbers than their models. So most of the time, it's probably a bee or a wasp. So you got to be persistent and persevere when you're trying to look for these flower fly mimics. So going forward and trying to make this distinction, when you're looking into your garden and you want to be sure if it's a flower fly or a bee or a wasp, one hint that I can give you is try, of course, first, look for the number of wings. It's easier said than done. When you have pictures that are clear and showing the difference here, I know it's much easier. Where when you're in the field, it's like, well, but their wings are on top, or they're not close enough. I can't see if it's one or two. Even here on this picture from Sarah, like the wings are pretty close to each other there, that you wouldn't say that there are two wings here, but there are. And as I mentioned before at the start, flower flies has true flies, they only have two wings. So if you can't see actually how many wings are there on your specimen, try to take a look at the general shape of the wing. As you can see on the bee here on the left, it's kind of more, it's a little bit wider. It doesn't taper to the base. So the base seems to be a little bit wider, while on the flower fly, it narrows very here. So it gets very narrow at the end. So with a little bit of practice, you can see that hopefully you'll be able to spot these things on your specimens as you're looking for them in your garden. And also, as I said about the altiers, on this one, it's pretty clear. So if you can see those little things, those little knobs projecting outside of your of the specimen that you're trying to see, then you got a flower fly most likely. Other things to notice are, oh, and I need to do a little disclaimer here for you all, especially I try to do this with most Canadian specimens as I could, to show all the structure and different things with live pictures. But unfortunately, my portfolio has a lot of neotropical from the tropic material. So, but I try to keep only my tropical pictures for showing the structures. Okay, so don't try to look for some of these guys in your garden, because these only occur in South America. So, okay. Another difference that you can try to pay attention as you spend time in your garden, you're looking closer and closer, or if you're taking pictures, and I hope you take pictures because it's a very amazing hobby to be able to take good pictures and then later on being able to identify the specimens that you got. One thing that you can notice is that bees and wasps, they have mandibles. They actually have mouth parts that are used for chewing. So you will see a paired structure like this, the left there, which if you look closer, they actually have like little teeth that help them chew their food, or to help them carry their food in case of wasps that will hunt for prey for their young. While on the flower flies, as in most in all flies, they have a proboscis. And this is kind of like an extendable tube, actually. There's no mandibles, there's nothing for chewing there. And at the tip of this tube, there's kind of like a sponge structure. And it's through this structure that the flies just suck the nectar, that they suck their food in. So that's one big difference that you can look for. Another thing, in bees and wasps, they have very long antennae. So the feelers on the top of their heads, which are used to pick up signals in the environment. In wasps and bees, they're very long in comparison to their head. And in most flies, flower flies, they will be very short. So these two bars that I put here is just to show you a little, to position yourself to see where the antenna is. So here's the flower fly antenna, and well, here you can see clearly the wasp antenna. There are some flower flies though that have longer antenna, but they're not so much longer than the head as it is on these other ones. So hopefully with time, you'll be able to pick these differences up easier. And just another observation, that for bees, they will have kind of a tongue. So it has a similar, it works in similar way as the proboscis on the flies, but most of the bees and will have the tongue is more like tapering towards the tip with shape like this. But in any case, in doubt, just remember the other characters that I mentioned about the mandibles, the antenna, and the number of wings, and hopefully you'll be able to pick these guys apart in your garden. Okay. As I mentioned before, be careful when you have a specimen that you think are antenna that he's moving, but might just be its front legs. So pay close attention to what exactly is moving on the specimen. So very important, because I got asked about this a couple of times, if flower flies are a bad or something that you should be concerned of. So I will guarantee you that flower flies cannot hurt you. They can't bite, and they can't, and they don't have a stinger. So there's no way. They're very harmless. You can handle them in your hands. Just be very careful because they're delicate creatures, and it's better to just observe them than trying to manipulate them. But anyways, they won't hurt you. And not even, and the larvae as well, they're not capable of hurting you. So just to make sure that this distinction is clear, this is just a high magnification image of a honeybee stinger. So it's a hard structure, looks like a needle. There's no two ways about it. In this one, just as an example, maybe you will see probably a female actually, and you'll see something jutting from the back of its abdomen. And this is an important thing. So this whole part on the back of the fly is the abdomen that we call, this is the thorax, where the wings are. And this part here is the head. Okay, I'll probably say abdomen a few more times in this presentation. So just so you know, when I'm talking about abdomen, I'm talking about this part here. So sometimes you might see something sticking out of the abdomen of your fly, but you can be sure that that's not a stinger. So the thing is that this is actually the female genitalia, and it's also used for the female to place her eggs. So that's why it's kind of like a telescope structure. If you can see here, there's like several segments, and they're kind of like a membrane. They're kind of soft. They don't look like rigid, like a stinger on a bee. So, and this is all like telescoped inside the abdomen of the female, and she just pulls it out now and then. So just to make that distinction clear, this is not a stinger. This cannot hurt you. Oh, another great way of telling them apart, and is what I try to teach people. Just look at them fly. I was going to do a terrible pun on this, like if you want to be able to identify a flower fly on the fly, oh, there you go, I did it. So try to pay attention to how they fly. I'm going to show a little bit how the honeybee flies right now, and then I'll show you how a flower fly does. So let's play this video again. So just see how the honeybee, it kind of like, it looks like they're heavy. They're going up and down, left and right, the same specimen, and they're it looks kind of clunky the way that they fly. But now check out a flower fly. So I had to slow down this video. It was going to be really hard to pick this up. My friends from Europe probably recognize the species. This is not a species from North America, but this was the best video I could get for that. So again, the bees. So very heavy movement, kind of like it seems erratic. I know they're not erratic, but it's kind of a heavier movement. It's kind of like, I don't care if someone is looking at me. While the flower fly, they kind of make more of these straight flights and very, very quick. And even when they're approaching on a flower or something, any disturbance, and they just dart away very quickly. And so that's one of the things that I look for when I'm trying to spot fireflies in the environment. And also, as you could see, hopefully you could see, they have this beautiful habit of hovering. So they can stay in one place there, just flying, kind of motionless sometimes. There's some neotropical species that do this beautifully. Or as Sarah said, sometimes they just come and like, come check you out. And so this is one of their beautiful abilities of these of this group of flies, which is called hovering, which my colleagues from Europe probably know them. The English name over there would be hoverflies. Sometimes people can talk to me about hoverflies. Yeah, well, in North America, we usually call them flower fly, but it's the same thing, just different names. And I'm actually going to talk about common names a little bit later on this presentation. So yeah, let's leave that for later on. Another thing, like when I'm observing and trying to spot flower flies, is that they're not such messy flower visitors as bees are, which makes sense because bees, they need to collect their pollen and they need to accumulate them in the specific structures on their body to be able to take to their nest and feed their young. And while they're doing that, sometimes they get really messy. I love this picture of this bumblebee because you can see the little grains of pollen flying around it. It was really being a busy bee. and try to squeeze and get the pollen there. While like flower flies, they're very neat and tidy eaters. So just drop there and get their nectar and pollen and be on their way. That doesn't mean that they don't carry pollen on their body. They have hairs, pollen will stuck to them, and they will carry them to other flowers. They're just more, I guess, neat in doing it. I am biased toward flower flies, sorry. And also, so you can pick up, because there will be other flies, of course, in your garden. And this is not a fail-proof hint that I'm going to give, but this might help you screen out things that are not flower flies and are just other groups of flies. So if you see too many of these like spine-like structures around the body of the fly, it's likely not a flower fly. Flower flies usually are more, they look more naked. They actually have hairs, but they're thinner. Or the bumblebee and other bee mimics, they will look a little bit more hairier, but their hair will be more, will look softer, not like hard spines like on that other fly there. There are, just a caveat, there are some flower flies that do have these spines, but when they do have them, they're very smaller number and usually only on the thorax. And so this area here, okay, they won't be on the legs and everywhere like on that other guy there. And another one, and this is very technical, and maybe we'll have good pictures, maybe we'll be able to see them on the fly, but flower flies, they have, if you see all these lines on the wing, we call them veins. So the technical term for them are veins. So all these lines are veins. The flower flies, they have a specific vein that only occurs on them, which is this middle one that we call vena spuria. That's the technical term. But basically, it's a vein that's in the middle of the wing that its ends don't connect to any other vein. Like here, it gets pretty close to the other vein, but trust me, it doesn't connect there. It only crosses this vein here. So yeah, so that's something very characteristic of flower flies that can help you also identify them to see if that's the organism that you have in your garden. Yep. Okay, now I'll try to, there's a lot of different groups, a lot of species inside the group of flower flies, in the family of flower flies. I tried to list just some of the common ones. The major groups, common ones for Canada for sure, but some of the species will be mostly for Northeastern North America. So I'm sorry, colleagues from BC. Some of the major groups, you might find similar ones, but for the species, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done with the Western material. So a shout out for all the people studying out there on the West. Let's look for flower flies, please. So a good way of, like with a lot of flower flies, for you to identify like the major groups is just to learn about the overall shape of the body and the pattern of colors on them. To get to species, it does get trickier because then you have to pay attention to some more inconspicuous characters, but still possible. But there will be a lot of species that, unfortunately, with at least the amount of information that we have so far, you'll only be able to get to a species if you take the specimen to a laboratory, work under a microscope, and a lot of the times you actually have to dissect some parts of the specimen. So unfortunately, we're not there yet to get all of them, but I'm confident with working with more, it's the kind of studies that I do as well, to try to be able to identify these guys with no need to kill them, right? And still some ways to go, unfortunately. So I'll try to give an idea of like some common and distinct groups that you might find out in these next following slides. So first, the groups that kind of look like bees or bumblebees. These first two here, the common name that we've been using is dronefly. It started because some of these flower flies actually look like the drones of the honeybee. On the left there, you have the orange-legged dronefly, species most common in wetlands, but sometimes depending on where your garden is set, if you have like some natural woodlots close by or some natural wetlands, so some of these flower flies might pass by your garden as well. So it's always good to keep an eye out for them. So like the orange-legged dronefly, it's from those groups of droneflies that kind of have patterns of bumblebees. If you looked at bumblebees or went to other webinars that talk about bumblebees, you'll see that the patterns are strikingly similar. On the right there, you have the transverse banded dronefly. The patterns on the abdomen. Hope everybody learned about the abdomen. So back here, you can see that there's a yellow and black pattern that kind of reminds of like bees and wasps. And another hint for these guys, it's very cool if you can see on their wings, that vein, so one of those lines on the wing, it does a little dip here. So this is one of the ways that you can pick up these the droneflies from other flies that are occurring in your garden. And also we have the Narcissus bulbfly that looks a little bumblebee-like. This is unfortunately an introduced species here in North America. It's from our colleagues there in Europe. Sometimes to tell this guy apart, a good thing is if you're able to look at the back leg, the hind leg of the species, it's kind of thickened, a little bit thicker than the rest of the legs, and you will see there's like a little triangular projection there at the tip of its leg, and that's how one of the ways that you can pick out a Narcissus bulbfly from other ones. Now for some groups that look like wasps. So these are false horns, incredible resemblance to wasps. You can, one of the ways of trying to pick them out from other wasp mimics is that they have patterns of yellow and black on their abdomen. They seem to be made by like a fine powder, a fine yellow powder covering it. So that's one thing characteristic of these flower flies, the false horns. Curiosity, a lot of their larvae, their young, usually bore into the solid part of wood in rotting logs or stumps. And I will call attention that if you can look at their eyes there on the head, head is here, here are the eyes. Just notice how they are completely dark. They're they seem like from a uniform color. And here we have a hornet fly, very similar to the bald-faced hornet, thus the common name. One of the main characteristics from the hornet flies are the eyes. So I hope you can notice here, it has kind of like a dark and white pattern going on there. All the species from this group of flies, they have like these intricate pattern in their eyes. It's very pretty. And besides the incredible mimicry that they present, larvae of this group are common in rot holes of trees. Another characteristic that is pretty distinct on this group is if you're able to look at the hind leg, you'll notice there's a little spike there, also very characteristic of this group. So I'll try to give like little hints in case you to cover like different parts of the fly for you to look for characters to identify them. So now we have those groups of flower flies that are kind of like a bee or a wasp, but not so much. So it's something that we call imperfect mimicry. So they're not exactly alike their models, but it's still either evolutionary that was maintained on these groups. It was useful, maybe evolutionary speaking in the past, and it maintained, or is close enough that still guarantees them a little advantage on surviving predators. So one of the very common ones are the globetails, the black-footed globetail. It has like a parallel-sided abdomen, so you can see the abdomen kind of goes a little bit straight. Sometimes it's a little bit oval, but not too much. And you can always see this like black and yellow pattern on the abdomen. Funny thing about the name of this group is why globetail? It's because the males of this group, they have this big circular structure at the tip of their abdomen, which is actually their genitalia. And it really stands out from the specimens when you look closely in the field. Another third common group are the calligraphers. The eastern and the margin calligrapher are very common in northeastern North America and in other regions of North America as well, of course. And so just to help you see the distinction, you are likely to find them in your garden. One common thing between them, if you can see here, they always have like these dark lines in the middle of their abdomen. Here they're fused into a single line, but here you can see it again. So it's always these dark lines with a yellow background. So this is one of the easiest ways of you to picking up a calligrapher among other flower flies. To distinguish between the species, these two guys, if you can see this pattern here on the eastern one, it's always going to be like this. And while on the margin, like it doesn't have this middle thing like on the other one. So it has the two middle lines, but doesn't have the ones on the side here. But dead on for the margin calligrapher, just look at the margin of the abdomen here on the side. If you look exactly here on the side, it's all yellow, like from beginning to end. So that's the only one of the calligraphers here in Canada where the whole margin is yellow. And these guys here, the margin calligrapher, actually, they have like different color morphs. So they will have different color patterns on them. So there are some of these guys that can be completely black actually, but the margin of the abdomen will always be yellow. So you can be sure that you have a margin calligrapher there. And our last guy here, another introduced one, but also will likely be a common sight for you, is the common compost fly. It has a very thick leg here in the back. So hind leg, you'll be able to see there. Their wings are very glossy. It seems like they're very much transparent. There's no like shading or anything on it. So that's one way of picking them out. And also, and this starts getting a little bit trickier, but the face here, the face is the front part of the head. It's kind of curved like that. So those are some of the characters that you can do to be sure to identify a common compost fly. I think I might be going over my time here. I'll try to speed up a little bit here. And now I glitched my presentation. Okay. So the oblique striped tail, another possible common sight. One way of identifying the striped tails in general is that they're the only ones that will have these at the tip of the abdomen. They will have these like oblique, they're kind of slanted markings, yellow markings on the abdomen. So you have like two yellow straight here. And then you have these oblique slanted yellow marking on the side. So this is how you pick up a striped tail from other flower flies. And with the long-tailed aphid eater, it has a similar pattern to the globe tail that we just saw on the other one, but these flies, they're way more bulkier. Their abdomens are kind of wider, and overall they're larger than the globe tails. As soon as you start seeing these guys in the garden, you see how different their bodies are. And mucksuckers, I'm actually reviewing the tropical, neotropical species of this group, and it's a delight seeing them. So not all of them are yellow and black. And actually not all bees are yellow and black. I hope you've been watching some webinars and some of the other amazing guests that came to these webinars and saw there are a lot of native bees that are actually kind of metallic, shining. And we have other flower flies that are actually metallic as well. For the mucksuckers, besides this metallic shine, they have this particular vein on their wing that is kind of straight. Should have learned my lesson by now. But so it doesn't slant outwards like this. So it kind of goes straight up. So that's another characteristic that you can use to identify mucksucker. And also, a lot of these mucksuckers, they have like markings on the wings. If you can remember the hornet fly that also has markings, these guys also have some markings, but they're usually just red with dark markings, not with pale markings as it was on the other one. So I promise this won't be too technical. So what is genus and genera? I've been fighting to not use these words so far. I've been using groups or other terms to exemplify that. But why do I like to bring this to attention to the general public to be able to talk about this? I know that common names are easier to pronounce a lot of the times and easier to remember as well, but it is very hard to attain like a stability in the use of it. Like what will decide that like the common name that we're using in Canada is the one that they're going to use in the States, that they're going to use in other English-speaking countries, or if they translate it to another language, how will that affect the common name? So like using scientific names, and in this case, the names of the genera, scientific names of the species, guarantees that like anywhere in the world where you use the scientific name, people will know that you can only be meaning one thing. So I'll try to exemplify why one shortcoming of like using common names that sometimes is a problem. So genera, genus, they represent a larger group. They represent a grouping of species that are actually related, evolutionary speaking. They're kind of like close relatives. So when I talk about a genus, a lot of information already comes from that. I know, oh, if you're genus X, oh, I know that your larvae does this, that you look like that you occur in certain habitats. So it's a more concise way of adding more information besides knowing exactly what organism you're talking about. It adds way more information when you use these scientific names that are accepted all around the world. So just a few examples. For example, this is a transverse banded dronefly, and then we have the common dronefly. We've been using the common name dronefly to try to represent these like similarly related organisms. And the actual generic name, the name of the genus, is Eristalis. We have the calligraphers, the eastern, the margin. Their genus name is Toxomerus. The narrow-headed marsh fly or the broad-headed marsh fly, they're all part of the genus Elaphilus. Besides bringing this is one example. For example, if you talk about a marsh fly in the UK, that's a common name that they use for Siomyza. It's another family, another group of flies, has nothing to do with flower flies. So if I start using marsh fly, the common name for Elaphilus, there might generate confusion. They might think something completely different of what I'm trying to talk about. So this is one of my concerns of sometimes we have to be careful with the use of common names and always keep that in mind. And remember that scientific names are important. They have a value for us as researchers and people who enjoy flower flies or other organisms as well. Another reason why I bring this up as well is because you can identify your specimens. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, one of the results from my study was to make a picture key, to make it as easily accessible as we could for everyone, so everyone could identify the genera by themselves. We used a lot of images, is richly illustrated. We tried to call the attention of the user, whoever is using the key, to the specific characters that you need to see. So if your character doesn't fit any of these options here, you click on the button and then you go to another option that will give you another set of groups for you to look closely at your specimen, and then then you'll be able to identify their genus. So that's another reason why I wanted to bring those names up so everyone can use this key and know what we're talking about when we're talking about the genus and genera. Another wonderful source of information is the Field Guide to the Flower Flies of Northeastern North America. It is Northeastern North America, but it's already a fantastic base because some of these species will go into the West and South as well. So it's a very good start for anyone in North America. And it's complete with diagnostic pages where you can compare straight on your species, and hopefully you'll have used our picture key to get to the genus, and then it'll make your job much easier because you can go straight to the pages of the genus to compare your specimen. And they also they point to specific characters to look on the specimen's size range. If you can see it with the naked eye to see the characters, or you're going to need a microscope. They give a little shaded image of the specimen so you can have a general idea of what its shape looked like, where you can find these specimens, habitats, size range, the specific characters to look for, the distribution, how common it is. It's a wonderful, it's a trove of information. Jeff Skavington led this fantastic research, led this work with other colleagues of ours, and it's in Princeton field guides that you guys can pursue. A few last things here. I'm almost at the end, I promise. So iNaturalist is a fantastic source of information where you can put your pictures, and there are experts there that might ID your pictures. I am one of those experts. I'm trying to do the tropical ones, and I'm really behind schedule doing those things because it's too many pictures. And then you can also ID and help register all these species and where they're occurring. This is so important for a lot of ecological studies or even taxonomical studies, so we know the distribution of these organisms. And the pictures, they're just amazing. You might have seen that I used a few for my presentation. And also coming up very soon this weekend is the City Nature Challenge. Cities all over the world will be collecting images of wildlife and putting them up on iNaturalist. And it's a very healthy, friendly competition between cities to see who is going to be able to record the highest number of species, of wildlife species in their city. So I hope you, I put the link for the Canada competition. So 43 cities in Canada are going after that. CWF is supporting this event as well. I'm going to be there in this weekend for sure with my daughters to try to get some more pictures. As you could see, I need more pictures of flower flies from North America still. And yeah, and if your city is not registered there, that's no problem. All the pictures, all the images and records of species that you put there are so valuable. It's such beautiful citizen science that can be done. I hope you guys will all join us on this activity. And that's it for me. I just wanted, before opening up for questions, I just want to like to thank all the wonderful people on the internet, iNaturalist and other websites that allowed me, either by explicitly allowing me to use some of their images, or sharing their images and videos as Creative Commons license out there, so we can do these kinds of webinars and enrich the experience to try to bring the beauty of nature to you all. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Gil. That was so much information, and gosh, on all levels, it was really clearly explained. So that was super. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go through the questions and see what we have here. Okay, so is a hoverfly a flower fly? I believe it is, but what's your say on that, Gil? I think you touched upon that in the presentation.
Yeah, I mentioned in Europe, the common English name in Europe for them is hoverflies because of their habits of hovering. But in North America, because of different, well, and here we call them just flower flies, but it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Okay. And then do most flower flies typically make a noise while flying, like a buzzing noise, or are they quiet?
If they're a little bigger and and if you're like trapping them in a net or trying to hold them down, they will buzz. And this is kind of just trying to startle you. So you let them go. As I mentioned before, they mimic bees and bumblebees and wasps so well. It really works to their advantage.
Okay, great. And then how many species of flower flies do we have in Canada? Is there an estimation on that?
My memory is terrible. That's why I keep notes. I will give you that information in a minute. Can we go to the next one while I look it up here?
Yeah, sure. Syrphid flies seem to be attracted to open flowers. Are there any outlier species that go for closed, any other species perhaps that go for closed flowers? And are there any species that are host specific to plant species families?
Definitely there are. Our records, I can tell about some of these groups of tropical flower flies that I know. For example, there are some species of orchids that they are only pollinated by this one species of flower fly there. So it actually goes inside the orchid and then it gets the pollinia as it is coming out. And I got this from an orchid researcher that was trying to figure out what was the only organism that he saw going through the orchid. For North America, I know we have records for some of these groups that they only been recorded for a certain genus of plants. On the Northeastern guide for flower flies, there's a lot of information in those regards in case the audience is curious about that.
Okay, thank you. And just a reminder to people, there will be a follow-up Zoom email going out with the replay link, and we'll put in some links in there to help people with some exploration of flower flies. So is there a time of day that is best for trying to find and photograph flower flies?
Wonderful question. Thank you. So flower flies, they're kind of finicky and they're kind of gentle. So if it gets too hot, they will stop flying because they might desiccate and die. So the best times would be, and also if it's too cold, most organisms will not be flying anyways. So you want to go for the sweet spot early morning, early mid-morning, and then maybe later afternoon. It really depends on how much the temperature is, but going through in the morning, you're probably going to be lucky in getting more species. I'll also try to avoid overcast, too windy as well. That will keep them from flying too much. So an open, clear, sunny, cool day is best.
Okay, thank you. And I think I missed one. It says, what is the size range for flower flies?
So they can be under the smaller one. There's one genus that gets really small, but usually they're around 1.5 centimeters. But it can be, sorry, let's just say 0.5 to 1.5 centimeters.
Okay, thanks. And then someone's asking, what is the honey, water, and cola recipe, and like the ratios, the proportions? Do you know roughly what?
Yeah, that's also something that I have colleagues that do 1 part each, but I think that's too much. I would do 1, 3, or 4. So 1 honey, 1 cola, 3 water.
Okay,
just
great.
play around, see what works best.
Thanks. And this might be our last, a couple more. Is it true that flower flies push their eggs into bumblebee ground nests? Is this a myth or is it true? Do you know? And while Gilles thinking, I think I saw a couple of questions pop up in the chat. So if you can actually type it in the Q&A, that would be helpful. Save me going and scrolling through the chat and back and forth with the different windows. Thank you. I
know we have some other groups that will do like similar habits, similar practices like the ant fly that I was talking, but this is another group and they will attack bee nests. But yeah, I'll have to get back to you guys on that one. Sorry. Okay. I can't confirm or disconfirm. Handle everything all the time. So oh, bee flies, bombilidae. Yes. Yeah, that's another group of flies.
Okay. Yeah. I think we're at the end of the question. Oh, here we go. Where can I find information on flower flies behavior? Does Jeff Skevington's that guide you mentioned, does that
It
cover
will,
some behavior there?
yes, the guide will talk a little bit more behavior. There's some wonderful literature from Europe. Our Danish colleagues publish some stuff. British also, they have some manuals on flower flies. So there's a lot of the European. I can get up the references, Sarah, and then send it on that email later if
Thank you.
people are interested.
That's wonderful. And you know, I know people have to go, and I think we're going to wrap it up now. I think I said we're at the end of our questions.
Oh, I got that information though for the numbers. I
For the numbers.
did a tally these days, and it's around 812 species on Canada that we are aware right now.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And so yeah, watch out for that follow-up email, which it will come. And thank you everyone for participating. This wonderful comments and thoughts people are sharing, and kind words as well. And Jill, thank you very much. It's been much appreciated that you shared your time and your enthusiasm with us. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you all for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you very much.
Great. Take care, everyone. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.